I'm looking at this conference, events, competitive landscape, tech conferences specifically, akin to a Game of Thrones scenario in a way where each has their own territories.
There are probably people that want to assert me from my seat, and whether they'll do anything, including poison and murder, to get there, we'll see. When I started out SaaStock in 2016, there was no other SaaS conference in Europe. Now there are several SaaS conferences in Europe, right? And it's a much more competitive space.
What people don't see under the surface of a SaaStock?
I think our business is unique in that way, in that you spend 12 months working on something that is delivered over a 2-day period. There are certain negatives around Web Summit, and one of them being the size, some of them being a bit more kind of like political views, let's say. We get it. It looks bloody gorgeous. Our customers are saying to us that they're becoming less attracted to mega conferences, and they don't care about getting 1,500 leads. What they'd rather have is 10 or 20 really good leads. Size is not everything, but quality is the most important, right?
Many of our mutual friends would love to hear our conversation, and I'm sorry that I haven't had a chance to catch up with you in Dublin this year.
No worries. Hopefully we can make it work this year.
Absolutely. We've had so much fun networking and just being part of the community and engaging with folks. But as you all know, and your schedule every year is very tight during the event, right? So finding 30, 45 minutes is tough, especially during the day.
It's usually, I do get to meet a lot of people, as you can imagine, but it's usually for a couple of minutes, and therefore not all of the conversations can be truly meaningful in that time. And then often I meet people 6 months or a year later, and I'm like, where they know me, but where do I meet them? And like, we spoke at SaaStock, and it's like, one of many. But yeah, I do try and make myself available, for sure.
What is like to be a CEO of a SaaStock during the event? Are you like a prettiest girl in the room that everyone wants to talk to you, engage with you, get you to a date or something? Or
I don't know. It's interesting, right? Because obviously I kind of walk around and people recognize me as the CEO of SaaStock. So as I'm walking, people are kind of looking at me and following me. So it's probably the only time in my life where I feel like a bit of a celebrity or an unwanted celebrity, right? I'm kind of also glad that it's only during those 2 or 3 days, and life reverts back to normal, and I can go to the supermarket and nobody knows who I am. But yeah, in general, like I always have this dream and this a bit of a pipe dream, but that I can go to the conference and I can just sit there and I can watch the content and watch the speakers. And usually, because I do the opening remarks, after the opening remarks, I sit down and I watch a bit of the first talk, and then that's it. I don't really get to see any other content, because kind of every time I sit down, either somebody starts speaking to me or I kind of get grabbed away and I have to go and do something else. So that's kind of a real shame, because obviously we take a lot of pride in getting all the great speakers from across the world, over to Dublin and now the US with SaaStock USA. But I get very little time to see, the fruits of their work and kind of learn from them, which is what I love to do. So actually, when I go to other people's conferences, I spend most of my time in meetings and networking, but I do enjoy those moments where I can watch a talk. But usually these days, I'm literally running around, like going to various different meetings. It's usually I'm booked up with meetings and doing content, recording podcasts, and very little downtime.
What kind of host are you before and during the event? Are you more relaxed, chill, and if things gonna go south, that's fine, we can take care of them? Or you are more like micromanaging things, like when the small fires burn, kind of getting out here and there, and you just...
Yeah, do you know what? I am like, we've got a team, right? And it's always under control. I don't think we've had very few disasters, over the years. I remember I think it was 2019, they start the build of the conference, the production company building all the booths and the stages 3 days before the event. So they load in. Yeah. And on the day when we kind of opened, one of our big partners, their booth wasn't finished. And they were very unhappy. They were very angry with some of my team. And obviously I had to come in and, calm down the situation. I think the first ever SaaS stock, I didn't sleep well the night before because I knew that we'd lost a lot of money. It's typical for a first time event to lose money. But I hadn't gone through that experience before and I'd overspent. I had a very sleepless night and, on the verge of sort of like a panic attack sort of during the night, again, given the kind of the first time that we were doing it. And I was thinking about how am I going to pay back all this money? So as I was walking around the event, like I looked like shit and people were coming up to me telling me, you look like shit. You don't look like you're enjoying this. And I kind of wasn't, a lot of the time. But since then, I think at all SaaStock events, like I kind of have a routine where, I make sure that I get up early, I exercise, do a bit of meditation. I don't practice a lot of meditation consistently outside of the conference, but when I'm doing the conference, like I certainly bring it in. And so often these days I'm given the experience and my routine and I'm pretty calm and the team, has everything in hand. So I'd probably be one of the calmest in the room, I think, to be honest. I think a lot of my members of the team are a little bit more stressed than I am, but I kind of know that like everything, it's just happening now. And it just runs and we very rarely have, major disasters. So, I'm pretty relaxed.
I couldn't imagine how much work you guys put in the entire year for the event that's going to happen just a few days, basically, right?
Yeah, it's a funny one, right? Because like I think our business is unique in that way, in that you spend 12 months working on something that just is delivered over a 2-day period or 3-day period, and then that's it. And then you go again. You work all your way up to building this thing, and then it finishes, and you're like, what next? We go again.
Did you ever think of yourself as you need to foresee the future or look in the future? Like, they say that car or automobile designers should always look in the future. Then you basically are planning ahead what people going to love to hear, what people going to get value from in the next 6 months, 12 months. You have conversation like that. You guys specifically think about what we're going to expect, what ahead of us?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, certainly, I guess kind of part of my role is about being, the visionary and strategy. So not only do I have to look 6, 12 months ahead, but, I'm looking 3 years ahead and 10 years ahead for the business, right? Not necessarily the market, because I mean, that's quite hard to predict. I don't have a crystal ball. But certainly we look at, and if we look at like last year as an example, there was a lot of hype around AI, OpenAI, ChatGPT, generative AI, etc. And we were fairly certain that we'd never done any AI content and that we had to be this year incorporated in, because within the market, our customers, the SaaS founders, will really kind of want to know and learn more about this and how do they incorporate it into their businesses, what it means for them. And we did that, and we delivered, for the first time, content on generative AI, how AI will affect your business across our SaaS.USA and Dublin events. And actually, I was on a podcast this morning, and I kind of made the same comment that I was surprised that our competitors, that I attended their events, and they had very, very to little or no AI content whatsoever, when it was really probably the hottest topic of the year. So we adapted in the way to incorporate that in, and we'll continue to do so. So we're always speaking to customers. Where do we really get the pulse on the market? We're speaking to our customers, and through that we're learning what are the things that they're interested in, what are the problems that they're having, and then we look to that and see how we can solve those through our event.
I think something that also stands out for me being an outsider is the fact that you guys are community driven in a way that you can get the trends from community, from the folks, rather than take Inbound or Dreamforce as an example. They are organizational driven. So they are building up the lineup, thinking about the trend and their own agenda. So what they wanted to deliver during, rather than having that backed community that can provide you with the flow of, here's where we're going, and this is what we guys need to talk about, and this is what we care about, right?
100%. And that actually comes from our DNA in, our kind of origin, right? Where before SaaStock existed, I'd launched this blog called SaaScribe. And effectively, that was a community-driven blog. And what I mean by that was I wasn't a very good writer. So I went to the experts and, got them to create content for me, for, SaaS founders. Like I'm an event organizer. I'm a community builder now. I guess you would say. I've never run a SaaS business, right? And I'm not in the trenches. I'm not an operator, not a SaaS founder. So from that respect, it's very difficult for me to curate, like on my own, a conference and the speaker lineup that I think, is going to help our audience. So we've done from the outset, just kind of really leverage what I guess is our weakness and made it into a strength by, incorporating our community, into speaker recruitment, agenda curation, and, other things like that.
What people don't see under the surface of a SaaS stock being the best SaaS conference in Europe, and then you having a conference as your main business, what part of the business are not as noticeable that you're like running on a daily basis? And then what's the ambition 2024 and beyond? Where are you pivoting? Where are you kind of expanding into?
Yeah, good question. So I guess a lot of people, don't see like all of the work we do in, putting on the conference. They're getting the emails, they're seeing some social media, they're seeing speakers in our network, talk about SaaS stock, and they're probably hearing, and certainly in Europe, like we have a very strong word of mouth. And, so people are learning about SaaS stock from other founders that have been there, other investors that have been there. And that's something that's just kind of built up by us just putting on, an excellent, very focused event year after year. They obviously probably don't see a lot of the sales activities. So if you look at our revenue, as a business, the majority of our revenue is driven by our sales team, right? But the wider audience won't really kind of see that too much, right? And that's a lot. It's a lot of inbound that the sales team are managing, which is good. But we also incorporate, a bit of outbound in there. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about, the exhibition part of SaaS stock, the sponsors that are on site, the startup program as well. So if you look at last year across the startup program and our main exhibition hall, there were probably about 170 companies that had some form of stand. And actually last year that was driven by, really 3 people to get the 170 kind of exhibitors. Obviously, all the event operation stuff that, like I mentioned, that kind of happens. Like nobody sees that until the day of the event when it all comes together, right? So it's a 12-month cycle, but it only comes together on the day of the event. We've hired a kind of like a director of product to work with us this year for the first time. Now, if we look at the product of SaaS stock, the conference is a product, our speakers are part of the product, the networking, the connections are part of the product. And within SaaS stock, it's not just one event. There are lots of different events within SaaS stock. And with all of these things, I've created these products, but like over time, I would say that there hasn't been a lot of ownership in terms of the development and the innovation to kind of make these better. Because in general, as we look at it, and if we looked at it reflected on last year, we're very stretched across, kind of many things. So to kind of give, one particular product or even like all of them as much love as we can and that they need. Now, having this director of product come in, she's going to kind of own these products and make sure that we innovate, that we're, staying on top, that we're, they're being the best individual products, but also being cohesive, that we're getting the right people there. And when we look at it, when I started out SaaS Stock in 2016, there was no other SaaS conference in Europe. Now there are several SaaS conferences in Europe, right? And it's a much more competitive space. And so this year, there's a big sort of like mandate for us to really get back to our roots of like content and community. And on the content side, really start to build out for us with the vision that we become, the leading source for, online for SaaS founders that want to learn how to grow their business. And so people will know us for that, and they'll then know that we have a conference. But I feel like right now People know us because of the conference and
Right.
the value of that, but less around the content. So we kind of want to flip that back to how it was.
Do you think it's also going to lead you to monetizing those digital assets into additional revenue stream for your organization?
I think it's a definite possibility. It's not our main goal, but of course, if you have a leading high traffic, high number of subscribers, sort of like media side of the business, of course you can monetize that, through adverts and podcasts, or on the new sponsors on the newsletter and so on. I'm sure that we will get there. It's interesting. Obviously, there are a lot of businesses that do that very well. I'm also seeing, in the media at the moment, that media businesses in general are really kind of suffering from, I guess, kind of withdrawal of advertising, and a lot of the businesses are not doing well. So for us, it's not core, but it's supplementary, and I think these things would certainly add to our net profitability as well. But I think our main goals are really to grow the audience and awareness first.
I'm curious to learn how the SaaS journey, SaaS stock journey, sort of like intervened with your entrepreneur journey. Like we were talking about where the SaaS stock is going to go in the next 5-10 years. But I'm curious to also learn from the standpoint of you as an investor, entrepreneur. Like there must be many opportunities, many sort of like things that will be dragging your attention to, hey, let's do this and that and that. And besides the podcast that you're doing and the content part, like generally, if you reflect on the journey and what kind of sort of like opportunities are popping up and where are you at right now, how you envision that connecting to the overall like SaaS stock journey that you have, or that kind of project, if you are kind of intertwined as well as like separated from both.
Yeah, good question, right? I'm a first-time entrepreneur, so SaaStock is my first business, but we've been going 8 years. For the first, I want to say like 4 or 5 years, one of the things that I did very well was focus, right? I just focused on the conference business, any, ideas or opportunities that were kind of presented to me. It was kind of always we're focused on the conference and scaling the conference and being the best at one thing, right? Which is obviously great advice that is given. And I think for most companies, as soon as you start to be distracted by, all these different kind of side projects and ventures and running multiple businesses, the main core business can suffer. So I was very good at that, up until 2019. Then 2020, with the effect of COVID, effectively, our main and only revenue stream, got dilapidated.
Right.
And it kind of did force me to kind of reflect a little bit about, well, had we had alternative revenue streams, obviously, would this have been helpful? However, we pivoted very quickly to virtual conferences. It sustained us, but we had to reduce the size of the team. One thing we did launch our second product it was like 2021. So the idea came about during COVID, and that's the SaaS Founder membership. And this effectively could run alone as a standalone business. But to your question, like this working intertwined with SaaS probably makes the most sense, right? And what we're trying to build here is the world's leading support organization for B2B SaaS founders. So like an EO for SaaS or a YPO for SaaS, getting SaaS founders together, putting them in peer groups, they get together monthly, us sort of curating that, helping them build out a network, getting them access to the best kind of education. And that's kind of an exclusive group. And that's a recurring revenue business. We've been scaling that, but scaling it slowly and largely because I would say the majority of the 20 people, almost all work on the event side, and we don't have that dedicated team really on that membership side. So this is something that I want to scale up, and I believe, we can scale it up into the hundreds and then thousands of SaaS founders, which would then, whilst not the main objective, be a multi-million-pound recurring revenue business, right? So the question is, like at the moment, is we're trying to integrate it into SaaStock, but there's an argument for this having standalone, dedicated sort of business, and that being more successful. I've done a bit of investing and angel investing, over the last few years, and I'm doing that kind of with a purpose, and this is with a view to a longer term, kind of interest of mine to do more investing. I definitely see as part of my future, that will be something that I'll be working on a lot more.
Are you having access to this rich network of CEOs and founders? Are you often pitched by early stage startups? Hey, Alex, I'm going to give you an advising share if you introduce us to people, help us to build that network, investors, et cetera, et cetera. You have that, like, is that something that happening off the sort of like record during the event, and how often startups actually do that?
Yeah, so look, I get a ton of reach out about like people just wanting my time and they just want to ask questions. And
right.
I've just started a business and can you tell me if it's a good idea? You know, and I'd love to help everyone, but also, I've got to be precious with my time because I mean, even without these things, I don't have much time on my calendar. And so like putting these things in where I can be helpful, it actually doesn't help me and it probably harms me as such. So a lot of the time I mostly kind of ignore those, or there's a kind of polite, sorry, like I don't have the time. I get a few like people that kind of, offer a carrot of like, advisory stake within the business. But again, it's just not really core to me. And when I get those, I kind of reflect and just think, look, I probably just don't have the time that to really kind of dedicate to this person that they need. So it hasn't been a big interest of mine, but I say I haven't had huge amounts of those, but I've had a few. But yeah, it's not really a core interest of mine.
That's quite fascinating, to be honest with you, because I think that in your position, leveraging the network and leveraging access, it's like, you spend 20,000 euros to get to event to generate leads. And then you being a CEO of that event, having access to all of those speakers, partners, et cetera, and just kind of probably walking by hand any early stage startup to access would be possible, doable. Are there any niches that you consider to be sexy for yourself that you're like, oh, if an early stage startup gonna approach me with like some advisory offer for that niche, I would be curious. I would be interested.
No. Do you know what? Honestly, no, because my kind of plan is more to get on the investing side where, we are taking a stake within the business, but it's more through an investment vehicle rather than, an advisory position, and a board seat or anything like that. So I think it'd be more tactical. And when I look at it from the investing side of things, I think that kind of ties into your question about the advisory role. I mean, it's not necessarily joining the board, but you would have to kind of give up and dedicate certain amounts of time.
Sometime, yeah.
Where from my thoughts around the investing side is I don't want any board seats. Like we can offer value, right? But like we'll take equity, we'll give you money. We can offer access to the SaaS network, but I don't necessarily have time to get on calls with you and provide advice around problems that you're having.
What do you think about the business model that Nathan from the Founder Path is doing with regards to sort of like having a conference, having the platform, and then sort of like looking for companies that they can give money to, and then he can raise capital for that? I like while you were telling me this, I was like, hey, it's interesting because it's similar to the model that you guys can run as well. Have you thought of this?
It is similar. I guess. I mean, look, I love Nathan, and he's got his lovers and haters. He's a bit like Marmite, as they say in the UK. And, Marmite is a spread that you put on toast, and some people love it and some people don't. I know Nathan really well. He's spoken at most SaaS stocks. I've traveled the world with him. Obviously, he's come a very smart guy. I guess the way we look at where Nathan is at the moment, he has found a path, which is his core business. Then he's created this event as a kind of top of funnel to get people in, where he can then, I would say, then sell, his revenue-based financing product to them. So he's kind of leading with the private debt facility.
Yeah.
And then the events is just part of his marketing strategy. Whereas obviously we've come at it the other way, where it's the events and the community is our core business. And of course we could add a plethora of products on top, which could add value. But right now it's not in the short term for us to do something like that. We're really kind of focused on scaling the conferences and, making them highly profitable, but also highly valuable, and scaling the founder membership as really kind of, I would say, the two core things for SaaStock sort of right now.
Speaking about the SaaS local, I'm curious about the model and just generally the idea behind it, because it's simple but elegant and scale. It's like, I look at this as a type of like a franchise type of model where like
it is a bit,
you can have.
Yeah.
So for those that are probably maybe heard of SaaStock, but are not familiar of the SaaStock local model, can you speak to this for a second?
Yeah, 100%. So I guess, again, like if we look back to before SaaStock existed in the origins, right? So we had the blog, we had the podcast, the newsletter, and all these online elements. But because through speaking with people online, people wanted to get together, right? And at the time, and this is 2015, I was really surprised that London was arguably the SaaS capital of Europe. Yeah, there wasn't a SaaS meetup happening in London, right? And given that I, had the initiative to, create the blog and was building an audience, I felt it upon myself to do this and put together the first SaaS meetup in London. We called it London SaaS Meetup. And then we ran a number of meetups. And I mean, that meetup itself was very successful. 120 people came. People drove from all across the UK. And, you could see it in their faces, right? People were happy. They were thankful to, speak to other founders that somebody had put on this small grassroots event. And we ran a number of meetups for the first couple of years of SaaStock. We stopped doing those because it was quite hard to scale when it was me going to every meetup, putting them on, flying to all these different countries. That wasn't really scalable. And when we stopped doing them, and then we just said, well, look, the conference is just the opportunity where we get everybody together, and that's where all the money is coming from. We'll leave the meetups for the moment. And I think in retrospect, it was probably a bit of a mistake, because you want to engage your community all year round. You want to have opportunities, if you can, to bring them together all year round, not just once a year. So rather than, popping up once a year and saying, hey, it's SaaStock, we're back, come to us. What value are you adding, throughout the annual period? So we came up with the idea of SaaStock Local, which was really kind of to do these SaaS meetups at scale, and, powered by SaaStock, kind of with our processes and our kind of model. But effectively, it's a meetup, a SaaStock and a SaaS meetup that's happening in a local city. And we have somebody, we call them a city leader, but effectively they're community builders themselves. They're, somehow invested in the SaaS community and ecosystem. They want to be seen as, the community builder, and this kind of helps elevate them, within that ecosystem of SaaS. And then, they kind of put on the event. They take on a lot of the tasks, but we support sometimes with finding venues, finding speakers, if needed. But effectively, they do a lot of that. And then on the franchise kind of model side of things, the tickets can either be free, but most people have a nominal fee, because if you pay 10 euros or 20 euros, you're more likely to attend than if you you register for a free ticket, right? Yeah. So we look to try and get some commitment there. The city leaders get 80% of the ticket revenue, but none of them are in it actually for the ticket revenue. I mean, the ticket revenue barely washes its face, and covers, some of the costs, which is obviously important. I mean, some of them have sponsors which help cover the costs, but they really kind of do it for, a different purpose, which one is about elevating them in the community, bringing the community together because they want to do that. And I think the other one is, often they may have like a business behind them which would benefit from being in front of that audience. So we now have SaaStock locals in about 23 cities across the world, mostly in Europe. And we're looking to scale that to 35 this year. So if you're listening and interested to bring a SaaS community together, in your area, then please do reach out to us. But we're looking at scaling that up. But the ultimate goal is to get to, north of 100 cities globally, which I think we can do in 3 years.
In my opinion, this is a great model. And I feel like it's one of those opportunities where you can share, shed light on the local startup scene and sort of like highlight the players and the startups, and maybe bring some attention to the region and getting some investors. So I think like it's an interesting space to be in, and I do believe that it has a future, and a very big future in there. But again, considering that I'm Ukrainian and I've spent a considerable time in Ukraine, and like having SaaS stock Kiev, but also like what Ragnar with the Leaf 99 is doing in Ukraine, sort of like highlighting the community and like bonding it together, bringing some investors, some attention. I think it's great for the scene, but also if you can make up some business out of it and think about how you can monetize it, that might be it. So talking about this sort of like scene is something, you are an expert in this, so you're probably the only person I would know to talk about this, but I'm looking at this sort of like conference, events, competitive landscape, tech conferences specifically, akin to a Game of Thrones scenario, in a way where like each has their own territory. So you have Inbound, you have Dreamforce, you have Collision, you have you guys, Web Summit, and stuff. So can you share some insights, or like the other like Starks and Lannisters? Are there like inside some like kind of things happening? And maybe it's going to be exclusive. I don't know whether you talk about this or not, but
yeah, I don't know if I would sort of disappoint you in there, because obviously building it up to the Game of Thrones analogy, I don't think it is as much. Certainly from the tech conference perspective. Now, so Web Summit, for instance, I don't think they pay huge amounts of attention to us because we are a little bit different. Now, their former CEO now, Paddy Cosgrave, does come to SaaStock, and, it is in Ireland. And so perhaps he's paying attention in the way of like looking at it and hearing that it's a great event. I think they also use it as a vehicle because we get a lot of great investors and speakers over. So it's an opportunity for them to connect with a lot of these high net worth people within the startup scene. So that's kind of one thing, and we're totally cool with that. We also go to Slush and Web Summit. We haven't been to Web Summit last year, but we go to a lot of the tech events. Really also to see what the opposition is doing, or the competition. But again, I don't view like Slush as a direct competitor, because it's a everything startup event, right? Right. But there are a lot of SaaS companies there, and there's a lot that we can kind of learn from them. Now, I would say within the SaaS conference space, which has a lot more competition now than in 2016, it was just us and SaaStr. Now there is, like in the US, I think there are 4 SaaS conferences, including us and SaaStr. There's Nathan's SaaS Open, and I think there's one called Ascent in New York, which I've never been to, but maybe that needs to change. And then in Europe, there's actually more. Now I think there's like 5 or 6 SaaS conferences in Europe now, including again us, SaaStr. We're at the top. SaaStr is kind of at our heels, trying to be number one. I would say, and then we have these kind of new up and comers, and I've been to last year. Conferences in Malmo. I've been to ones in the Netherlands. There's conferences in Germany. There was one in Kiev, but obviously not for the moment. There's one in France. There's probably more, right? And I would say we're all pretty friendly. Like I speak to all the other SaaS organizers, probably less so SaaStr. I probably in the last couple of years have had one email exchange with Jason Lemkin. But with the other guys, because I'm actually physically at their events, we speak, right? And we share bits of information, but they were also kind of like probably careful not to kind of like overshare. And I think like for me, it's great to see the competition. It means that the market is healthy. I mean, if it was just us in 2016, which it was, and now in 2024, it was still just us, probably not a good sign, right? In the market. And it's really a benefit to us of all these other events. And there's also a drawback, but a benefit is our sales teams can go to these events and then go around all the sponsors and speak to the sponsors, right? And we can generate a pipeline and generate revenue from these events. If they weren't there, you know, we couldn't do that. But the drawback is that sometimes, you know, some of our customers may decide to sponsor another event and not ours. And, you know, so there is a bit of competition for budget there. But I also think, like, with the enhanced competition scape, not everybody wants to be number 5 or number 6 in the market, right? Some of them want to be number 1, and fair enough, right? I mean, I'm sure most should probably have the mindset that they want to be number 1. So I definitely think, then kind of going back to the Game of Thrones analogy, that there are probably people that want to, you know, usurp me from my seat, you know, and have their event, you know, number 1, and whether they'll do anything, you know, including poison and murder to get there, you know, we'll see. But so yeah, I've got my eye on them, but I don't obsess about the competition.
You mentioned, do you pay attention, so like niching down to being a SaaS conference or being a tech? Because like, again, I've made an assumption that as long as it's tech conference, then, you know, you're good. But then you kind of say, hey, you know, we're kind of different. We're in that SaaS part of that. So are you looking at the competition only with regards to being SaaS exclusively, or you're sort of like looking at the other players in the tech space and you're going in that tech realm as well?
Yeah, no, I think there is the broader view, right? We look at the broader tech space, and of course, like for instance, we wouldn't want to schedule a conference when Slush is on or when Web Summit is on, and you know, Inbound or Dreamforce. Although Dreamforce seems to change every year, and there have been, I think, within the 8 years we've been running SaaStock, once or twice Dreamforce has kind of happened very close to SaaStock, which has meant that you know, we maybe even Salesforce couldn't sponsor SaaStock because they had their own big event and it was difficult to resource things like that. So we look at that. We look at the competition from the respect of when we attend their events, how are they doing it, from everything through registration through to their expo booths to, you know, the content, and get as much learnings and things that are good and bad. And we kind of take that back internally. And then I think with the SaaS conferences, there's probably just a slightly different focus, you know, kind of on them, again, because it's very SaaS specific. And again, who are their partners? Who are their speakers? Because, like, for instance, SaaS Open, Nathan's event, is happening 2 months before SaaS.USA. And we don't want to deliver the same speaker lineup, right?
Right.
And if he's got his speaker full lineup out, you know, quite early and, you know, long in advance to us. So we can look at that and say, well, look, we don't want to have the same speakers there. And it's a shame that he's got this person because we really love them to speak at our event, but we think it may not make sense, right? So we do look at that lens. And I'm going to Nathan's conference as well. And, you know, for me, it's a great opportunity to go to other SaaS conferences, spend 2 days just like meeting with like a bunch of people. You know, I'll get a lot of ROI out of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now you mentioning this, like that sometimes you need to kind of book in speakers in advance and build those relationships that they are going and sort of like featuring your event, not going to Nathan or someone else, because again, you know, you cannot create that fresh perspective, that fresh content every 3 months, right? Like it's, the momentum is off. And so now you're sort of like thinking about, okay, how I can create for the speakers, for the guests, the best experience, to be able for them to wanting to come in next year, the year after, and looking at this as your customer as well, right? Not necessarily just the people that are buying tickets. So this is interesting. But now you mentioning this, probably the sales team received one of the main objections for them is like, why do we need to, to sponsor your event if we're sponsoring this event? Like, because I personally was battling with the idea, like, where do you want to go? Where do you want to invest? Where was support? What kind of value? And from my personal experience as a customer, I've been to SaaS Talk a few times. I've been to SaaS Open, and I love the sort of like middle ground between the tech event where it's big enough to have great speakers, great network, but it's not as big enough. So then it becomes a show, and then you're just coming in and you just walk all the time, and it's all the early stage or like freelancers, people, and there's no mid-sized companies, there's no meaningful conversation. There's no vetting process in terms of who want to be participated.
Yeah.
And you're like, for example, it's cool that you didn't go to Rep Summit this year, because I've been, and I'm honestly disappointed from the fact that it's a lot of walking. It's a lot of waiting. It's a lot of people that are not in any way I can do anything with. Yep. And it's a lot of early stage, and it's a lot of government. It's a lot of government. So as if I'm like choosing where I'm going to move my company, right? Like 3 pavilion of government institution. And comparing to what you guys have, a featured list of companies that you have similar interests with, you can do business with, you can engage with, you see the founders, and I love that format. And it's in the space where you have 2,000 people, right? So question is, if I were to get, first off, your overall feedback, where enough is enough in terms of the size, and then maybe I can name a few names and we can just sort of like bulletproof them right now, whether.
Yeah, I mean, it's a timely question, right? Because you know, if you look at how do events companies grow, right? And when I'm talking about grow, I'm talking about revenue here. And like, I mean, first of all, I guess, do you want to be a growth business? And you have to answer that question. And I've always wanted to be a growth business, right? And I want to grow and scale this thing. And I want SaaS stock, one day, and it's probably going to be, nearer to 10 years time to be a $100 million, dollar euro business. Now, one of the levers that you have to consider there is really scaling the event in size, right? Other levers are launching more events, obviously going international, increasing price, and so on and so forth. Now, some of the events that you mentioned then, and I've not been to Dreamforce. Here, obviously, it's a Salesforce event, but you do get a lot of the right people there, but you get 100,000 people like coming to San Francisco, right? And that just seems too big to me, because obviously, how do you find the right people? And I don't know what the process is there, but I would probably, if I went there, I would probably just go to a few of the side events that were relevant to me and just kind of be in San Francisco at that time. So I think there is a point where you get too big, and we've looked at that and said, well, look, if we want to continue to grow and grow our revenue, and we're kind of looking at growth rates of about 30% year over year, at the moment, then again, one of the things is that you grow the size of the event, and which can then help you increase the pricing and the sponsorship. But I think we're at the moment taking a conscious decision that we think 4,000 people, roughly 4,000 people, like, is enough, and making a conscious effort to focus on the quality of those 4,000. If we can, we mostly have a very good, I think it's certainly around about 60%. That are like founders and kind of C-level, then you have probably about 10-15% are investors, a few execs. And then you have a few people that are perhaps sort of more junior. And sometimes they're the teams that are coming with the exhibitors, so you have your account executives, your SDRs that are manning the booths, and that probably is most of that makeup. But we're looking at how do we get, 4,000 decision makers, right, to SaaS stock, right? And we're hearing a lot also, again, which we always do, as you say, speak to our customers, is that our customers are saying to us, and certainly from last year, that they're becoming less attracted to mega conferences. Size is not everything, but quality is the most important, right? And they don't care about getting 1,500 leads, right? What they'd rather have is, 10 or 20 really good leads. And we got a lot of that feedback last year. So this year, we're not planning on growing it any bigger, but we're planning on increasing the quality and helping our customers meet with the right people is kind of the focus. So that's our viewpoint, so we want SaaStock to have 4,000, decision makers in Dublin, 4,000 in the US, and that to be quality. And then when you look at some of the other events, and even, one of our competitors that has gone to, 10, 11,000 attendees, I think they've really diluted their audience to become a bit more of a sales event. It's probably 50% sales reps and sales reps selling to other sales reps, right? You know what I'm talking about.
That's the word.
So I know a lot of people that will no longer go there because one, it's too big. And then two, the quality of the people, is seemingly weakened because it's 50% sales reps. And again, nothing against sales reps, but that's not what a lot of founders want to go to an event. They want to speak to other founders. They don't want to be sold to by SDRs or AEs. So we could, in order to scale to 10,000 people in the next couple of years, based on the European market, we would have to dilute the quality of the audience of SaaStock and let anyone in, right? We don't want to do that. And we want to kind of focus on quality. So that's our conscious decision. And then, as you say, like the mega events, when 70,000 people at Web Summit, it's so hard to find anybody of relevance. It's just too big. It's too many people. When you look around you, everybody you speak to is not relevant to you.
Yeah.
Right. And there's no serendipity because it's so big. You don't bump into anybody, over the couple of days. But whereas in SaaStock, for instance, and even in some of the smaller SaaS conferences, like I went to B2B Rocks in Paris in September, and within the first 10 minutes of me being at the event, I just couldn't stop. Like every minute I was kind of meeting somebody that I knew, which was great because they were there. But you don't get that at the big events. Like, you can kind of go, for a whole day without seeing anybody, right? And I don't think that's good. So serendipity is a good thing, or organized serendipity, but also you have to do more than that, right? You have to make the connections and build in, networking elements to allow people to meet.
These mega events that you called, do they have any type of innovation? Do they do any type of innovation? So it's like, oh, they did this first time. So when you expect from Apple or from Amazon, in a way, in the industry that that they have so much budgets, they have a lot of teams, and sometimes they do a cool thing.
Like Slush, for instance, is one of my favorite conferences. It's a not-for-profit. They're probably generating more than 10 million for the event, but then they're spending all of that back into the event, right? And it shows. I mean, it looks bloody gorgeous. It has such a great production quality. They build their own tech. They have their own, platform for buying the ticket and then, matchmaking. And certainly, so they innovate there. They probably lead the way in sustainability and things like that. And they put on a good show, I would say, and they really enable a lot of startup to investor meetings really well. So I think they do that. I mentioned Web Summit. Obviously, there are certain negatives around Web Summit, and one of them being the size. Some of them, being a bit more kind of like political views, let's say. But one thing, hats off to them. They probably have one of the best networking apps, I think. But then they need that, because if you have to filter 70,000 people, right, it's going to be a tough job. But I think they have a networking app that I wouldn't mind, for SaaStock, for sure. But we certainly look at we look at these events because they are leading the market, in tech and things like that. And look at what they do, and again, like what are the good things and so on. And there's definitely things that they've done really well, and it's helped them, get their position. And we look to see if we can, be influenced by that in some ways. But in many ways, like the advantage they have is obviously the revenue they're generating and their kind of profitability and their ability to perhaps invest in these things, which is often a constraint for us.
I'm smiling because I've just remembered, I love attending these mega events where you hear a former NBA player on a stage sharing his investment strategy in the app leveraging his platform or her platform of like whatever 100 million followers and just believing in the blockchain betting sport app for whatever. It's so funny all the time. It's like, oh, this is a great strategy, great business strategy. It's funny. So cool. You dropped some few names of the cool conferences that should be anticipating. Are there any others for 2024 besides the SaaS Talk that you would recommend listeners to look out for?
Well, if I look at my calendar for this year, or on the ones that I want to go to, I mentioned Money 2020 and Shop Talk, which again they're not directly in it. One's e-commerce or retail, one is fintech. I'll likely probably not. I think last year I went to all the SaaS conferences, bar SaaStr in the US. This year I will probably do fewer. I think those that are closer to home, I'll do. I'll probably go back to Slush because I had such a good time there, and got a lot of value out of that. There's nothing new that I'm kind of aware of that I'm excited about. One that I've never been to, and that's also on the list, but it's coming up soon, South by Southwest. So I'm sort of like curious about that one, and how valuable it may or may not be. Given SaaStock is in Austin now with SaaStock USA, there's an argument that we could be there and kind of checking it out and so on. But it's one that's kind of on the list. But I think outside of that, there isn't really kind of anything new that kind of really sort of like piquing my interest. I think actually, I mean, maybe and surely there has been new events that have come up post-COVID, but certainly during COVID, I think we lost a few events as well. Like a few events companies went out of business, sadly. So yeah, I don't know, nothing really new in the market. I would say in some of the ones that I've been to several times, I'll just stop going to now because I'm not getting much.
You've mentioned Slash, the fact that they're nonprofit and they can reinvest everything into like creating a great product. Can you share some numbers marketing wise? Like how much would an average like event like Slash or SaaStr you guys are like spending on marketing? And then how does that competition work on an ad spend? Like do you guys compete for the positions and then before the conference and just kind of buying out the entire traffic? And then how is it compared with the budgets that Inbound and Dreamforce and Collisions are spending? I'm just curious to know.
Yeah.
So like,
I can share a bit anecdotally, and I can share a bit about us, of course. So what I see with Slush, they do very little advertising, right? Again, they've just got such a strong brand and word of mouth and repeat customer base that like all I see their marketing efforts are social media and their weekly email effectively. And they always sell out like 2 months in advance, which is a dream because for us, and I think for many others, it's the last 2 months where the majority of the tickets are purchased. And so it's a bit of a, being in events can be, quite a stressful profession because we'll do a 6 month, go-to-market cycle for the event. But really, it's the last 2 months where all the work comes to fruition. So if you're running campaigns 6 months out, hey, we've gone live, or, 5 months out, you're not getting huge amounts of traction. And the marketers themselves can feel a little bit deflated by putting in these good campaigns, but not seeing all the rewards. And then lo and behold, every year, 2 months before, suddenly you see that inflection point. So Slush, I don't think spends hardly anything. They probably spend it all on the physical event, and that's their investment. That's their marketing, I guess, right? Which creates the word of mouth. Web Summit spends a shit ton on ads. I can't remember the exact figure, but it's probably, I don't know, hundreds of thousands or more a month, maybe millions. I can't remember when it was quoted to me, but ads is a big driver for them to create awareness. And you probably, like me, are often followed by Web Summit ads on LinkedIn and other platforms. And they do that really well. I think they do that better than anyone I've seen. But again, they've got the biggest budget there, right? Now, we do a bit of ads, but our budget's like super low. I would say it's for the Dublin event, maybe it's 10K a month, something like that. Yeah. And really for us, very difficult to get full attribution whilst we can kind of measure it. Generally, ads is more on a awareness sort of level. for us and keeping us
Right.
top of mind for people. And people will see ads, but very rarely, I think, do they click on them, go through to the website and then purchase a ticket. It's not that sort of decision, I would say, with events, because going to an event, you really kind of, you need to know the event is on, and the ads help with that. When it is, if it's of value, there's a lot of research that goes into it. You speak to your peer network. You see if you can get a babysitter, right? Or your wife can give you, time away from the family.
Right.
And can you be out of the office, and can you get the meetings? And so it takes a lot of time between knowing when the event is on to actually when you can commit to it. So the ads aren't really a trigger to purchase as much, but more of like keeping it top of mind. Oh, I must buy a ticket to SaaStock. I must buy a ticket to SaaStock, but I'll do it, when I'm fully 100% confident that I am going and I can go. And then, people will just go direct to the website and buy it and not through the ads. So yeah, it's a funny thing, but in general, we're really still unsure on the whole ad side of things. We've been quite cautious, I would say, and kind of with our 10K spend, certainly on Dublin.
When you think about the unit economy in your business, at what threshold does the paid acquisition, do you think, could make sense volume wise, where you can actually spend? Because as you said, like if Collision is spending 2 tons or shit ton of money on ads, like can they actually afford that spend, or they are at the point where like you're just spending too much and they wanted to recoup something later on when they're doing some additional product and so on and so forth. And then the fact that, for example, you guys and then maybe Slash and some other leaders in the space, but more niche, smaller in terms of the size, are not spending on that acquisition, is that dictates your unit economy, then it just doesn't make sense, or you just are small enough, but then if you're going to get bigger, 20, 30, 40, the volume wise, you would be able to allocate enough budgets to be able to kind of dominate the space in terms of the paid acquisition.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good question. I've had a number of conversations with people over time, and even those people that have run growth at Web Summit who are no longer there. And it just interestingly, within the SaaS event space, people generally don't seem to be kind of running ads and maybe coming across the same challenges that we have. So, I mean, I guess if you look at Web Summit, right, their total addressable market is everybody, right? It is kind of pretty much everybody,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas we've got a very, we've got a much smaller TAM. You hear anything from there are 30,000 SaaS companies globally to, more than that. I'd like to think there are more than that, but it's a much smaller kind of niche audience. So our cost of acquisition will be higher, into a smaller audience. And how do we get in front of that audience? Because it is so niche, and how much wasted ad spend do you get? I think we looked at and it wasn't last year, but maybe like the cost of acquisition would be around a couple of €100 potentially for a delegate. And now if we're selling a ticket for €1,000, it's still it's a pretty good kind of deal for us, and that could be scalable. But I think the concern has just been around the small TAM and how do we get the ads to kind of the right people and build out that audience. So I think that's kind of probably the challenge that we face and others to kind of really make that scalable. And when I look at when we've done ads in the past, and like when I think we ran a successful ads campaign in the first ever SaaStock, everybody that came to our website was retargeted, for months, and SaaStock ads followed them everywhere. So they were just we were just constantly top of mind, and they were reminded to buy tickets, right? But we've been using, I think last year, like LinkedIn was probably like the main kind of channel. I think a lot of our audience is there, not really Twitter, maybe a little bit on Facebook and kind of Instagram. But yeah, I would say, look, we still haven't nailed it. I think we've gone or are going with a different agency, certainly for US this year. So we don't have people in-house to do that.
Can you share some thoughts on the engagements? Because especially for maybe online events that you guys are doing, the level of engagements from people dropped down drastically this year in terms of the attention span, in terms of actually showing up, in terms of showing the interest, engaging. as if whatever cool content you create, really powerful insights, people don't engage. They just don't care. As if they have so many things going on for them, then it's not the priority. So what's your thoughts on this, and what are you doing with that engagement span problem, if you have one? And what's your thoughts on where it's going?
I think we have felt an engagement problem around our newsletter, and in part that could be around the quality of it, needing to improve. And we are going to be, now we've got the new head of content in and the role that we haven't had for 3 years. This is something that we really want to create, the best newsletter in SaaS, and we'll be investing in. And we want and need that engaged audience, right? I mean, when you look at SaaS.local last year, we brought around 5,000 people together, right? Something like that across the year. And we did a couple of webinars last year, and I think they performed pretty poorly, certainly to my expectations. We've got, like you mentioned, this great access to great speakers, and we got them in, and we were expecting 200 people, but actually maybe 40 kind of came to the live webinar, and that's not the standards that we're kind of used to, right? Yeah, we're not seeing that, but I think we will be, the SaaS.USA, putting on a live event online. Doing that probably about 6 weeks out before hopefully, that goes well, but be interesting to see how the market respond to that. But yeah, personally, I mean, like I see a lot of webinars and things that I kind of want to attend, and my time is poor, and I end up like not attending them. I think like Tony Robbins did a free online event about a few weeks ago. And I'm sort of getting a bit more curious about maybe attending my first Tony Robbins physical event, at some point. Yeah. And so I thought I'll sign up to the free online event, but it just kind of ran at a time where I just couldn't attend, right? I think you're right. I think there is an attention problem. I think there's so much content. Everybody's doing content, and so there's the saturation, and people are really perhaps don't know where to look. But also I think everyone's, pretty busy. And it's a struggle to really kind of, commit to these things. So
do you think we should also think about the forms or the packaging or the way you sort of like provide the content, different formats, different, like adding more entertainment? Like, do people expect more memes to see there? Like, do you think, like, again, being on the front line of this and being I would say like a content company in a way, because you guys produce a lot of content, did we transform into a different consumption habits where like we have to give short content, short span, and et cetera, or we can sort of like play our own melody and just continue doing the 20-minute keynote with slides, with like insights, with like QR codes and stuff?
I mean, across the board, like, we need to innovate within the event industry in real life, conferences, and not just doing keynotes and panels and firesides, right? And again, with the online stuff, I think you're absolutely right. We learned that probably the hard way during COVID, when we pivoted first to virtual events and just tried to replicate everything we did in person online. Things are different. And I think like the attention spans, TikTok is ever growing, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts. I personally, I don't know, maybe every day I'm probably like checking TikTok a little bit, maybe a little bit less kind of Instagram Reels. And I think perhaps we're getting into these habits of like 90-second content, and getting used to that. And I'm seeing more B2B come about on TikTok, and SaaSdoc have actually just launched our TikTok channel. But I think we've got to look at these things and think about how do you do short form content, and then how do people consume content like on at home, and online. And I know through the virtual events experience that a lot of people will register and then they'll put on the live event, but then they'll just carry on working, and so they're listening, but they're not watching and really kind of engaging. So does the online content maybe then become a bit more of a podcast? But if you're already doing a podcast, then what's the point of having an online event that's a podcast? I don't know, but I think we've got to look at different ways. And I haven't personally attended, but I think Nathan Latka supposedly does quite well on his webinars when he runs them. And I think he's got a different format where like everybody comes on Zoom, everyone has to have their camera turned on. He calls people in, he'll pick on you or whatever and like call you to come in on stage and stuff like that. So there are a few surprises. So like you have to pay attention. But I don't know if that's a bit mean, right? You know, like everybody, you got to have your camera on and like I could at any time, you know, call your name. But yeah, I think that there are ways that we have to adapt, right?
Should businesses view conferences primarily as as opportunity for PR, brand building, networking, or it's a viable lead generation channel? So if I have allocating that budget, so just talk to me through that expectation versus sort of like ICP and ROI in terms of what I'm getting and what I'm expecting to.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, everybody has different objectives. The highest objectives that we see are always around lead generation and just kind of networking and, you know, connections, right? Then I think brand awareness, one, hard to measure, but people do kind of, you know, come for that. PR is a little bit, but it's much lower down. So it's a big kind of focus for us. It's, you know, part of our mission statement, right? About helping people connect and thrive. So I would say that's a big part. When you look on the lead gen side now, those that exhibit at SaaStock get anything from maybe 200 to, at the top end, 1,500 leads. What I see, those companies that are scanning 1,500 leads, and you get a couple of our customers that manage to do this. You know, they've got these big sales teams that are kind of going out there, and it's almost like a competition who can get the most leads. And a lot of these people are just not going to be relevant. They're never going to buy your products, right? So are they getting ROI from 1,500 leads versus the cost that they paid for their SaaStock booth? This trend, I think, that now that we're seeing and hearing about, higher quality leads, fewer leads, connecting with the right people to get the ROI. So I think it's a big focus for us, and really just kind of understanding like how we can enable this to the best of our abilities. So again, something that we're looking to like see how we can address, but we don't want it to
bring
become
on more CFOs,
right? So yeah,
let's bring more CFOs to conferences. Let's do it. So what's the ratio between like tier one sponsoring, like gold and then silver and platinum in terms of exposure and like coverage? If I'm looking at the sort of like venue or like at the amount of attention I'm getting, like is there like a percentage in terms of that you're measuring or you're looking at, or like the biggest booth with the best design and stuff, brand work gives the 100% of attention, and the last like
there's definitely a correlation between the top tier sponsors, their visibility. They tend to be the ones that get the most leads, have the most meetings, are involved in the most content. Just generally, they'll have more visibility throughout the event. In general, silver and like gold level sponsorships are probably the sweet spot. We sell obviously lots more because it's in that more kind of affordable range, although it's not cheap. I mean, our silver sponsorships start at something like 30,000 and gold is like 60,000, something like that. And in general, then you are competing like a lot more with the other kind of gold and silver partners for attention span. But then the partners then need to do something interesting and clever to get people and the right people to their booths. But then also we need to kind of help them get the right people there as well. But yeah, definitely like correlation between the bigger you go, the more you get out of it. But it does become quite costly at that point.
Now, talking about this, the let's say like the mega sponsors, the one that will take the space. I assume that you need to be a bit like probably industry agnostic, technology agnostic, or like client agnostic. So you need to be very like diversified in terms of, for example, like being a QuickBooks or being some platform or someone that could sort of like can engage with different type of customers. It does make sense to be very niche for vertical type of customers. For example, like my company, Folderly, it's an email readability platform. There's a handful of email companies that I can sell the email readability to. So I think by definition, it doesn't make sense for that $60,000 partnership because there's no way I'll send it. So the idea is that, and this is something that probably you guys are selling to, is like having that partner that can sell to as many companies as they are, so being that generalist in terms of that's correct assumption, right?
Yeah. So we talked about the TAM earlier, right? And then of generally 30,000 SaaS companies. Now our TAM is even much smaller from, I think, the exhibition side, because generally the sweet spot for us is B2B SaaS companies that sell to B2B SaaS companies at probably SMB and mid-size. And when we look at that, and generally most of them are, from a silver and gold kind of, onwards, they're over Series A, they're usually venture backed. And they can sell to multiple roles, the CEO, the CFO, whatever. And we've had in the past, but we're seeing that less so in today's market. Companies that kind of wanted to dip their toe in the market, test our stock out. Maybe they sell to CFOs and they want us to try and help us kind of build that audience, but they're getting less return. It's quite a small pool of companies. We think probably less than 1,000 really that would be a really, really good fit for us from the main sponsorship, the 30,000 and above. And then the startup program it's a much bigger option pool.
Yeah, gotcha. One last question. The biggest, best exhibitor over the last 8 years at SaaStock, who win the medal?
Oh, yeah, good.
The most successful, maybe the one that hyped up the most.
I think probably the most successful has been like Profitwell and stroke sort of like Paddle, right? But I think like Profitwell, they had Patrick Campbell, who's a tour de force. He knew how to do events really well. They always had these great kind of like hooks to get people there, like giving out Wonka gold chocolate bars, and within that there's free credits to the Profitwell platform, doing interesting or crazy talk, doing a lot of content at their booth, and they would generally be at the top of getting the most leads by driving the most kind of traffic. So I think they've been the most successful over the years. Obviously now Paddle has acquired Profitwell, so Paddle remains one of our top customers, and but we kind of lost the customer because they both used to sponsor at the top level, and now we only get the one.
Alex, thank you so much for your time. Now I know the space. I can make a smart choice. I appreciate you for joining me today, having this talk, and taking the time and educating me. So
thanks so much. I really enjoyed it, and you are a good host. So it was very good.
Thank you so much, Alex.